I'll be honest with you, if someone comes in with a site plan and they show they're going to have large volumes of railroad ties or manure and things like that that aren't necessarily something that would be compatible with what we have consistently allowed within our commercial districts, the staff would interpret contrary and then suggest they go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and make an interpretation, or go to the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for an ordinance amendment for clarification. Actually, we have most of the time they come through as ordinance amendments. I mean, Dot's been dealing with it for quite a few years, where most of the time we see, rather than going to the BZA, they go through ordinance amendments.
Several of those.
What if you were to stick in after other landscaping related materials, put a comma in there and said such as rock, topsoil, or railroad ties, or similar inorganic building materials? And doesn't that cover what you're really talking about? Or is that too?
Well, topsoil and railroad ties are organic.
Okay, well,
You
then
might
take
say.
out the organic or similar building materials.
I hope they are.
I was going to say that. I'm like,
Yeah, I think if there are some specific things that we're trying to avoid, we probably ought to just spell them out, and that would save both staff and the BZA having to spend time on that and be clear for whoever is making application for it. So the outdoor storage and sale of mulch, rock, I think we say mulch, landscape rock, railroad ties, and other landscaping-related materials. I think that would be probably more clear and hopefully avoid some headaches for some folks down the road.
18 years I've worked here, it's only come up once, so it's not a really big item. But I'll defer to Tom. Is this significant where it has to go back to the Planning Commission?
Oh, no, it's just
Okay.
clarifying what you intended, I think, and what
So it'd
they
be like
intended.
the outdoor storage and or sale of mulch, comma, landscape rock, comma, railroad ties, and other landscaping related materials.
Or if you just said, and other landscaping related materials, comma, such as rock, topsoil, railroad ties, or similar building materials. Or similar materials might even be better without building in there.
I'd be happy with either one of those.
But either way,
I
because
think the building and the rock and the railroad ties, that's very clear cut to me, and I'm not a professional in this, but that if I were to read that, that would be a better clarification of what we've got than what we have right now. So I like that.
so you're saying the outdoor storage and sale of mulch, landscape rock, railroad ties, or are you going
And other landscaping-related materials.
or the outdoor storage and sale of mulch and other landscaping related materials such as landscape rock, railroad ties, topsoil.
Now let me read it the way I got it written. The outdoor storage and or sale of mulch and other landscaping related materials, comma, such as rock, topsoil, railroad ties, or similar materials, comma. Wouldn't that do it? Now, it could be non-roofed and non-enclosed. Hopefully we won't get into that kind of discussion. If you remember.
Well, I make a motion then that we approve ordinance, the changes to ordinance 12-02 with the inclusion of the language that Tom Hale just stated.
I'll second the motion.
In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I will incorporate these changes. I will not be here in 2 weeks, and neither will Mark, because we are both out of the office for training. So I will make the changes, and I will trust that you will just check them out and make sure that you're okay with them. We'll go from there.
Yep, that's fine. Next item is ordinance 12-03, also first reading. Ordinance to amend the Farragut zoning ordinance, Chapter 3, specific district regulations to clarify entrance pillars are considered subdivision walls as established by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
An interpretation made by the BZA, and in essence what they were saying is we have a setback requirement of subdivision walls of 10 feet from front yard property lines, and primarily that is a protection for the owners of that subdivision wall, because that is, if you get within that 10 feet, that's within a utility drainage and construction easement, and legally if somebody goes in that is the holder of that easement and they destroy that wall, they are not obligated or financially obligated, I guess is the more important aspect of this, to replace it or repair it. And when I worked for the city of Oak Ridge, we had a situation where a subdivision didn't get a permit, and they built a large wall, and they built it on top of a 24-inch water line. The water line broke, and literally it looked like by the time the utility got done with it, it looked like that wall had exploded. And everybody was upset because they wanted the city to pay for it, and the city's like, you shouldn't put that wall there to begin with. And this was an emergency. You don't have 24-inch water line gushing and not think it's an emergency kind of situation. So years ago, the subdivision walls were established that they have to meet such setbacks, and someone came in with some entrance pillars, and the determination was, yes, they are the same as subdivision walls. We're really doing this as a protection for the owner of those pillars. And so what we did is, what Ordinance 1203 does is amend all the residential districts that have reference, would be the R1, the OSMR, the R1SA, the R2, the OSR, the R3, the R4, the R5, and the R6. Here's an example of entrance pillars. Aside from the fact that they're also fairly substantial, makes Daryl's nervous if you get too close to the edge of the road. But it's really as a protection for the owner so that something does not happen and then they be out what it would cost to repair or replace. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of Ordinance 1203, and staff also recommends approval of this ordinance.
Any discussion? Looks fairly simple to me.
Seems pretty cut and dried and common sense to me. I make a motion that we approve ordinance 12-03.
Second.
Favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is ordinance 12-04, ordinance to amend Title 20, miscellaneous, Chapter 2, celebratory gatherings, concerts, parades, races, demonstrations, public assemblies, block parties, and picketing of the Farragut Municipal Code to add community events and to clarify sign requirements, review timeline, exemptions, and applicability. I can't tell you what I just read.
That is why staff calls it the special events permit ordinance. Getting that word celebratory out is just a tough one, so we always call it the special events permit. Last month, we amended the special events permit in the zoning ordinance, and we clarified some things, and that it applied to all private property. This ordinance is intended for public property, and so we made some clarifications with regards to that. One of the things that we also wanted to clarify was that town-sponsored events, such as the Taste of Farragut, the Red, White, and Blues Festival, Picnic on the Pike, the annual 5K run, these are jointly sponsored with either the Farragut Business Alliance and also with the Chamber of Commerce, and so that they would fall under this permit rather than the special events permit. We define the community event in the ordinance as a town-sponsored or co-sponsored event that benefits and or promotes the community. In essence, doesn't mean that that events that are held on private property don't benefit the community. The key is that it's town-sponsored or co-sponsored in this particular case. Normally I do a strike-through when I do a major ordinance like this with the changes, but I was having problems with the cut and pasting, and I couldn't get it to work. And so Allison said, just hang it up and just do it this way. So it's much easier. So I apologize for that. So I tried to highlight the things that I changed in there. The primary changes from the standpoint that aren't necessarily substantive, but they do get a different look, is that all the section numbers are changed because this is Chapter 2, so it starts out with 201. Added the authority, the purpose, and the scope. When we're adding the scope, we clarify that that this doesn't exempt anybody from getting a special events permit if it is still applicable to them. Also included under the definition section, the heading basically clarifying plural and shall and may and kind of the standard heading with that sort of thing. Again, highlighted community event, and then clarified that the permit is required for a community event as well as the other things that are listed in there. And also for ease of reference, when you talk to somebody on the telephone, it's hard to say, well, go to the fourth bullet on such and such. It's a lot easier to go to, well, if you go to section 2207, 3A, letter 6, letter VI, it's a lot easier for cross-referencing when you're talking to someone on the phone. So we really didn't change the wording. We just changed how the ordinance looked in that respect. And probably on page 6 of the highlighted changes, section 2208, the sign requirements. This section is new. There was references that you had to include a sign plan, but it didn't include what the requirements were. Obviously, because this is on public property, there may be issues with using public streets, like with the 5K run or things like that, that you're going to deal with the public streets and that. And traffic control, you need to follow the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. This is for liability purposes and also so that when people see something, it is familiar to them. The other is that if you recall when we were going through the special events permit, David Purvis had asked that they wanted bigger signs for community events. And so I clarified different with community events and then all other events. Community events basically are generally going to be larger scale, more regionally oriented, and at least that's our goal. That's what we're trying to accomplish with all these things that we're doing. And so we went with a 40 square foot sign. We went with the same requirements, and where we came up with the 40 square feet is that's our standard sign size for all permanent businesses. And so that's where we came up with the 40 square feet and the 6 feet maximum mounting height. Then we went with a 10 millimeter corrugated plastic. If you recall, that's what we went with the special events permit with regards to the size, and the studded T-posts. And then with the all other events, we went back to the special event permit and went with the 20 square foot two-sided sign, 10 millimeter corrugated plastic, so that we remained consistent. I keep looking back at the door because I know that there was an event that Allison Souza was going to try to get here on time for this. And so I think, yeah, she kind of thought that she wouldn't make it. I went over this ordinance draft with her last Thursday and gave her all the details. She emailed that out to everybody that they have on their emailing list for the FBA. Told people if you have comments, please let the town know. Come to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. If you're okay with this, that's cool. No one's here, so that's cool. They actually had suggested, just kind of threw a number out initially as a 50 square foot sign. I scaled it down to 40 just because that kind of makes it more consistent with our sign